Hello, and welcome to today's NEASC Virtual Global Forum, an in-depth look at school reopening. I'm George Edwards, the Chief Accreditation Officer at NEASC. Working with me today is my colleague in the Public Schools Commission, Allison Geary, the Deputy Director of the NEASC Commission on Public Schools. We're excited to see over 1,000 educators and colleagues from across the country and around the world have signed up to listen in and share thoughts with us today. We thank you for your participation and your ongoing interest in our NEASC Global Forums. Today, you'll hear from Adam Steele. Adam is the Superintendent of School Administrative Unit 39, and with him are some folks from his community that were involved in developing their district reopening plan. Today's NEASC Forum, like all of our past webinars, will be recorded and made available on the NEASC website, along with any resources provided during the broadcast. We've created the hashtag NEASC Forum and encourage you to use it when posting about today's forum on social media. For today's webinar, we've turned on the Zoom chat and Q&A features. Please use the chat to send general messages to other attendees. You can use the Q&A to submit questions for the panelists. We're going to take the last part of the webinar today to answer questions from the Q&A. So please click the thumbs up icon in the Q&A section to bring questions to our attention that you particularly want us to answer. Now, I'd like to pass the conversation over to my co-host, Allison Geary, who will start the introductions. Allison?
Thank you, George. Today, we have the opportunity to talk to one district team about their reopening plan. We would like to invite you to review the plan online in detail during or after our webinar. The link to the plan will be posted in the chat. We're so grateful to these panelists from SAU 39 in New Hampshire for coming on the webinar today. SAU 39 is located in southern New Hampshire near Nashua and the Mass state border. It's comprised of the towns of Amherst and Mount Vernon. It also includes elementary schools in Amherst and Mount Vernon, and a middle school in Amherst, and a middle school, Amherst Middle School and Souhegan High School. The high school and the middle school serve both communities in the SAU. So I'd like to start with having our panelists each introduce themselves. We have representatives from multiple different angles today. So why don't we start with Adam, and then we'll go with Stephen and Shannon.
Hi, good morning, Allison. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Adam Steele, the Superintendent of Schools for SAU number 39, and this is the beginning of my 5th year in this particular SAU. Thanks for having us, Allison and George.
Great, thank you, Allison. Good morning, my name is Stephen O'Keefe. I am a member of the Town of Mount Vernon School Board and the chair of our consolidated SAU School Board, and excited to participate in today's conversation.
Good morning, my name is Shannon Gascoigne. I am a parent in the SAU 39 district, 4 kids in the school, and have been an active member of the Parent Teacher Association for a number of years. Thank you for having me this morning.
Great, and then let's go Georgia, Katie, and Deanna.
My name is Georgia Craven. I'm an incoming senior at Souhegan High School, and I'm super happy to be here today. Thank you, guys.
Good morning, my name is Katie Kennedy. I teach 2nd grade at Clark Wilkins Elementary. I've been in our district for about 17 years. I'm also a mom, and I have 2 girls that go to our district as well, one in middle school and one entering high school this year.
Awesome, thank you. Deanna?
Good morning, my name is Deanna Quartz. I'm a school nurse at Clark Wilkins Elementary Schools in Amherst. I've been working at these schools for 19 years now. I also have 4 children, grown children, that all have gone through the Amherst School District.
Wonderful, thank you. And thank you again so much to all of you for being here. So we're going to start with Adam. Adam has an opening presentation for us just to kind of talk a little bit about the work that they've done in the district, and then we'll have a chance to hear from each of the panelists initially, and then we'll jump into some questions. Adam, go ahead.
Thank you, Allison. So I'll start by saying that our plan has been developed in public, which is, I think, one of the most important parts of our plan development. We've held meetings every week for the past 2 months that have been open to anyone from our public to join and to watch and participate. And the beauty of that plan development model is that we've gotten feedback along the way. We've surveyed parents and teachers multiple times to gather their feedback and to implement what they've suggested to us. And the result is that as our plan is approaching its final stages, we feel very confident that we've heard from our community. We know that our teachers, our students, our parents, our community members, all of our constituents have been included, and that's helped us to build what we think is a very successful plan so far. We've started with an objective that every student safely achieves a year of growth by Memorial Day. And we've said that because although that should be obvious to most, that's the purpose of schools. We know in these unprecedented times that we need to be reminded of that focus and of that overall objective to our planning effort and to how we implement what we do. And so we've returned to that over and over about being willing to let go of some of our paradigms that we've held to for many, many years, maybe even decades, in order to do what's best for our students for this coming year. So our committee was made up of about 25 people, and that served on the overall task force. And then those 25 people were assigned to subcommittees that also had several more constituents that participated. So our subcommittees were school nurses and our community medical professionals. Those folks included local doctors and nurses, our school nurses, and folks that have connection to the industry and to the scientific side of this pandemic, and provided highly technical guidance that got into the nuts and bolts of what we need to do to reopen our school system. A subcommittee of principals and also administrators that live in our 2 towns that might even work for other school districts or our retired superintendents participated and advised us in helping to develop our protocols. We had a subcommittee for faculty, staff, and our associations. And I can't underscore how important the feedback we've received from this subcommittee has been, because we've included from the beginning our teacher unions, our support staff unions, as well as any staff or faculty member who wants to participate. They provided detailed, pointed, and really clear guidance to us as we've gone along the way. Our parents and community member subgroup had, I think over 50 people at different times that participated in the meetings, not to mention the several hundred parents that provided feedback during our surveys. We had over 1,500 parents respond to a survey, and we only have 2,400 students in our SAU, including 600 written comments about our draft plan, which was very helpful and informative for us. We had a student subcommittee. One of our students, the chair of that subcommittee, is on this call today, and talk about helpful. Our students provided, frankly, some of the most formative feedback and the most sensitive feedback. Frankly, they gave us a sense of the things we ought to be thinking about in developing our plan. And then just in the last week, we've created another subcommittee of our guidance and social work professionals that are going to help us as we get closer to the start of the school year and helping us remember the social and emotional needs of our students. One of the key tenets of our plan is we understand that conditions are going to change. We know that 6 months from now, we might be thinking very differently about COVID-19 and our response to it, just as we thought very differently about it 6 months ago. And so instead of developing an entire plan for the school year, our plan hinges on having a set of protocols that are adaptive and can adjust based on the changing conditions in our area. And so we've come up with a 5-color way of organizing our safety protocols. So the red status means that our school campus will be closed, which is similar to what we did this past spring, and meaning we are in a purely remote learning scenario only. We hope to not be in status red anytime soon, but it's still, we know that we need to be prepared in case it's required for us. we originally had a status orange being open only for priority or small group purposes. We've since revised that, and our latest iteration of our plan shows that status orange will provide a rotating access to our campus for about 25% of our school population. And so this isn't an A-B model, but instead an opportunity to make sure that we are in a near fully remote model, but are still having access to our campus when it's safe to do that, both a greatly reduced population of students on campus. Yellow is that our school campus is open, but there are significant safety and social distancing requirements. And the key tenet of that everyone is well aware of and has been talking about is in status yellow and orange for that matter, everyone will be required to wear masks while indoors. And that's not how we started. That was not the original draft of our plan, but based on the input from our scientific and medical subgroup, including our school nurses, we've made that adjustment, and we're now committing ourselves that if we're in status yellow, we will be wearing masks while indoors. Green is a transitional status where our school campus is still open and the guidelines become recommended as opposed to required. And something our science and medical group advised us on is that this may not be needed because either there is a need for masks and social distancing or there's not. There's really no in between. And so their guidance is helpful. However, we're still keeping this in place because we think that even if the scientific and medical community is not recommending masks any longer, there still might be a community need for that from a sense of making people feel comfortable coming to our schools. Meaning, we think the pandemic has passed, but we still think there's a need for us to be recommending these guidelines to help people feel safe in coming back to school, which is a big component in getting people to be able to participate in the school campus. And then blue, which is what we're all dreaming and praying for on a daily basis, is our near normal campus access where life perhaps hasn't gotten back completely to the way it was a year ago, but it's getting pretty close. So with that, I want to take just a few moments to go through our key strategies that make up our plan. And our plan is several pages long and has lots of detail in it. And this is really just an overview of the things that we think are enabling us to be successful in reaching our objective. First, probably the most important strategy is that we are giving our community choice. We're giving our parents choice in whether their child attends school in campus or from a remote modality. And we're also giving our staff and faculty that same choice. We're going on faith with this because the numbers have to work out, and we know that. But because we've surveyed our parents and our teachers a number of times during this process, we have confidence that these numbers are not going to be perfect, but that they're going to be close. In that, our school year is going to be broken down into short segments that allow us to respond to the changing conditions. Our first couple of segments will only be about 2 weeks long and then roughly 4 weeks long for the rest of the year. And this is an opportunity for us to change not only our safety protocols as the year progresses, but gives parents and teachers the opportunity to make that choice for themselves about whether they stay remote or they come in person during those different segments of time. In order to make that work, there has to be redundancy and flexibility with our teachers. Meaning, if a teacher chooses to go from in-person to remote in a given segment of the school year, we have to have redundancy in that for that teacher to be able to make that work. And so we've rebuilt our entire master schedule and really how we run our schools in order to make this redundancy and flexibility possible, which in turn allows for choice to be available for our school community. In this time of change, something we learned this past spring is that our connection our students have to someone who is an anchoring adult is critical. The social emotional needs that our students have are only exacerbated by this crisis. And so giving our students that common anchor throughout the point of the year or throughout the entire school year, we think is going to be critical in maintaining the support that our students will need to have a sense of normalcy for this coming school year. We know that all of that means our teachers will need significant professional development time. And so we're looking at both having time over what's left of our summer and or even considering delaying the start of our school year if necessary to make that possible. If you read through our plan says we're going to do all the PD over the summer. But again, based on our open planning process, we've received feedback from our teachers that it may simply not be possible to have that time over the summer. And so as a result, we're iterating and considering making changes to that. We're going to leverage our outdoor opportunities whenever possible. For those of you who know where we are in New Hampshire, it gets cold for part of our year. And although we're happy that we are a hardy folk and we're proud to be outdoors as late as possible, we know that will be limited when it gets really cold, but we're still going to make use of our outdoor opportunities whenever possible. And then going back to that anchoring adult piece, our first segment of the year is going to focus on all of those connection sides of things, like how we're going to communicate, how we're going to organize, and making plans for how we'll be successful for the year, because we just have a sense, we all have the sense that this year will have disruptions in it that we can't prepare for. And so we're going to make good use of the beginning of our school year. So with that, I'll end my presentation officially, and I've got each one of our participants from our task force have some introductory comments that they would like to make, starting with Deanna Quartz, one of our school nurses. Allison, I can turn it over to you though, if you'd like to say anything in between.
No, the only thing I wanted to say is if you have questions, those of you that are attending, if you could put them in the Q&A, that will help us, and you can vote. People can see the questions and then click on yes, I like that question, so we can upvote them. There's been a couple questions in the chat, but if you can put the questions in the Q&A, that would be great. The only question we've answered so far is that they're starting the school in yellow status. Also, we've posted the plan a couple of times, so I'll just post it again. If you want to open the plan and be looking at that, you can, or you can look at it later, but that would be great. All right, Deanna, go ahead.
Good morning. And first, from the school nurses, we'd like to thank Adam for including us in planning for this. We feel an integral part of the team, and we appreciate all the work that's being done for this. At first, when we proposed as the scientific medical team to encourage mask use in the school, it was met with a little bit of animosity. People weren't too keen on wearing masks, but I think it's come around. Adam's come around, and because of the scientific evidence from the CDC, the Department of Health and Human Services, the American Academy of Pediatrics, all of those organizations recommend the use of masks for students and staff. According to the CDC, masks are okay for use of age 2 and above. It's not easy for younger kids to wear masks, but our plan is to give some information to parents, some resources, maybe get them to start having their children try masks now, so that first day of school is not the first time they're wearing a mask. It'll be better compliance if there's been some practice there. Even many adults are not keen on wearing masks. They feel it makes it difficult to breathe. Again, even as a nurse, when all of us, the school nurses, started training, it took a while to get used to wearing a mask. So it does take some practice. We don't expect everyone to get it right off the bat, but the more you practice it, the easier it's going to get. It is a point of source control, meaning that if I'm going to cough and I have a mask on, it prevents all of the aerosolization of anything I'm coughing out from going out into the public, so it stays in the mask. So a cloth mask doesn't necessarily protect me, but it helps me protect you. So the philosophy for our district is, especially our high school, is we want to help other people. And if we approach it from that way, rather than I just want to protect myself, I think people are much more on board in helping other people. And the main reason for the mask use is it's not going to prevent all risk attending school, but it's going to minimize the risk. It's going to be very difficult to be social distance at all times in the building. There's movement in the classroom, there's movement in the halls. So having a mask on assists with source control when you can't have social distancing. We're going to incorporate mask breaks into the school day for students and staff. When they're outside for recess, masks will not be required to be outside. That'll be a time when it's easy to social distance and transference of virus is not as high in the outdoors. And we feel that some animosity has been that parents don't feel it, or people don't feel that students can wear masks, especially young ones. But if you look at children in the hospital with severe medical conditions, many of them wear masks, are required to wear masks just for their own health. And they are able to do it. So we think if we set the bar high, kids are going to rise to the bar as well as adults. So I think that's all I have to say.
Great. Who's next, Adam?
Shannon Gascoigne is our one of our parents who has led our parent and community subgroup.
Thank you, Adam. Like Adam mentioned, we engaged the community through the task force. After our first meeting, parents and community members had the option to join via a Google form if they wanted to participate actively in the task force. Within the first 24 hours, I think we were approaching 50 folks who had right away signed up and wanted to commit weekly to participating. In the end, I think we ended up with 64 members in total. We spent overall about 10 hours meeting as subgroups through various Zoom sessions, averaged about 2 a week for about 3 weeks. And it was really clear from the beginning that the needs of students and families varied greatly. The concerns that we were hearing really ran the spectrum of social emotional impacts of students being in isolation, to the needs of working families, how to make distance learning more rigorous, health concerns, you name it. But the one consistent theme that I heard repeated after hours spent meeting with parents and community members was really the desire for the SAU to create a plan that allows us to protect the vulnerable in our community while still meeting the needs of those with lesser risk, which is a really tall order. The plan that we're working on implementing right now is dynamic, and I think it gets really close to that. It provides choice to families, so they're able to really consider and weigh their own individual health and safety concerns, their work-life and family balance concerns, and the segments that are built into the plan, along with the threat alert system, really allow for flexibility that I heard often that people were needing, and the ability to adjust your plans based on your comfort level. So right now, a lot of families haven't been back in school. They haven't been out and about very, very much. So having that kind of ease back into it and knowing that if it doesn't feel right, the next segment you can kind of change your plan is comforting to a lot of folks. We're all in the same storm, that's COVID-19, but our boats are all really different. And this plan allows families to choose a public school option that's best suited to their particular boat. So,
Great. Thank you so much, Shannon. Who's next?
Katie Kennedy, one of our second grade teachers who's been a part of this task force this summer. Katie.
Morning, everyone. So I'm going to talk about the instructional implications of this plan. So basically, each building took Adam's plan and designed it to meet the needs of staff and students at those grade levels. So I work at the elementary school. So what our administrators did is they decided that this year we are going to be working in pods. And each pod has 3 teachers, 2 classroom teachers, and a third that has to have a certification in special ed. So for example, on my pod, I'll have 2 colleagues and then myself who's special ed certified. During the day, I will have to take the kids from just my pod, which is a total of 30 to 45 students, so about 12 to 13, 14 in each class. And I will deliver the special ed services in literacy and math to those students. This eliminates children being pulled from multiple classes all over the school so that interventionists aren't being exposed to germs from many different classes. It also allows so that when I'm pulling kids to give them special ed services, my higher readers might go with another one of my pod teachers so that they can also have their individual needs met as well. Back to Adam's idea of flexibility, teachers are having to be extremely flexible a lot of us are being put into roles that we weren't necessarily anticipating, because they had to really just look at everyone's certifications and think about, you know, where can everyone best be utilized meet the needs of the kids and social distancing. So I think it's going to be a great year. I think it's going to take some creativity and, like I said, flexibility, but I think everyone is really willing to do whatever they need to do to help kids make gains this year, whether in school or maybe transitioning to remote as well. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. Who's next?
Stephen O'Keefe is chair of our SAU school board. Stephen.
Thank you, Adam. I'm going to actually take us back a couple months to the beginning of all this, where we actually had and called an emergency meeting of our various school boards to really talk about the crisis that was right at our doorstep at the time. There was no statewide shutdowns really going on anywhere in the Northeast. They were going on down south. I believe New York State was one of those. And we knew that something was actually coming down the pike, as we say in New England, that we needed to address quite significantly and broadly. And so we passed some emergency rules that allowed our superintendent the flexibility and the discretion to make decisions that would positively impact not only our communities, our faculty, our staff, and our students. And that was an awesome move, to say the least, because it really empowered him the ability to go ahead and actually make significant changes to the way that we deliver our educational services to our communities. Moving remotely, literally that following week, was declared by the governor that following day. So that process now, take us forward to where we are today, was a lot of work, a lot of heavy lifting from an administrative standpoint. Our faculty, our staff, our professional organizations, we knew that this is something that they had never encountered before. And so this was going to be really creating the map when no map existed before. So fast forward to the summertime, when we're trying to figure out, okay, this is where we've been. Now, how do we go ahead and create that map for the fall? And so Adam had created this task force that represented multiple members of our communities, our participating entities and agencies in our district, to really collaborate together and to generate and craft this draft plan that you guys are reviewing today. I had the luxury and privilege of working with, one of what I refer to as the three-legged stool, one of those legs being our faculty, staff, and our professional organizations. They volunteered their time over the past 2 months to provide their insight, their thoughts, their concerns, their wishes as we navigated into our school year in September. And that collaboration actually really afforded myself as a board member, but I also had the luxury of working with another board member. The two of us really learned a lot, and the concerns that those faculty and staff brought to our attention, we've potentially and absolutely have implemented into our overall draft plan. And as we move forward into the fall, this collaboration is going to continue. And senior leadership at the administrative level, at the building level, and even at the team level, that collaboration is just going to be so vital to make sure that we deliver the best quality education experience for our kids and for our communities. So very proud of our superintendent, very proud of our faculty and staff. Everyone's done a phenomenal job, and this is just the beginning, because September is not too far away, and we're going to hit it out of the park.
And finally, we have a student with us, Georgia Craven, who is chair of the student subcommittee. Georgia.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the mindset of the high schoolers that I've talked to and how we're going to go about this situation kind of emotionally and as leaders, especially from the upperclassmen perspective. I've had lots of Zoom calls and meetings and conversations with kids in high school about how they're feeling about this and the stuff that they kind of want to see in school. And so one of the first things that I've talked about with a lot of people is that we've all started to develop this "it is what it is" mindset, and that like we're all dealing with this. We have no option whether we can deal with this or not. Like we just have to do it. So we're looking at everything not as oh, that's not what I wanted, that's not what I always thought about. And I was like, and so now it's just, this is what it's going to and we're going to make the best of what we have. And so along with that, we all want to help each other as much as possible. There's been a lot of push for wearing masks in school, and now we're going to have that, like Deanna said, so we know that we're protecting each other, and by protecting each other, you're protecting yourself. And so I know I think like that, and a lot of other kids think like that, but not everybody does. We're trying to teach each other that that's the most important thing, and that it doesn't matter, the little things don't matter, and that it's about helping each other and keeping each other safe, and that will keep us safe. And then we also really care about prioritizing those who need more help than we do. So kids with special needs, we really want to prioritize. And if there's ever a time where only a few kids can go into school, we want to make sure that they have priority, because we know they need that in-person connection more than maybe we do. Or those who have like severe mental health and need the counseling or need interaction. So we really care a lot about our peers, especially that has come up a lot in the conversations I've had. And also we would just like to help the younger kids as much as possible, maybe in some Zoom calls or whatever. We know it can be harder for them to learn online if that has to happen. We are very independent and can do that ourselves, but we'd like to help the younger kids more. So that's kind of the mindsets that we've been discussing in some of our calls and discussions. So I hope that helps a little bit if you are a parent or a teacher, or even a student, that it can kind of get that message across.
Thank you so much, Georgia. I think it's very impressive, your attitude. And I think, you're right. I mean, many students at this point are just saying, look, let's just do the best we can. Let's try to, see how we can get through this and really pull together. And I think that's what's going to make it successful. All right. Well, we have a ton of questions from our audience. And, just a couple of things I want to emphasize that I really liked about the plan was the idea of the 10 segments. So if you look in the plan, they've split the school year up into 10 segments. And in those segments, students can make a decision about maybe working from home remotely for one segment, then they could come into the school. So it gives them flexibility and choice. And I imagine that helps with the grading piece as well, to look at those segments, those pieces. We also talked about the idea of an anchoring adult in the school. Somebody asked, is that the school or at home? And the idea is that there's an anchoring adult for each student within the school. And if we have a chance, we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then the other big topic, I think, was redundancy. And we had some questions about that. Adam, would you just clarify, what are we talking about in terms of redundancy? And in the plan, if you read the plan, it talks about it, but how will that be helpful in making sure that we have a teacher for every student?
Thank you. Yeah, I'll use one of our elementary schools as a good example for that. So at Clark Wilkins Elementary School, we're going to assign our teachers and all of our students to a pod of 4 teachers, including one person who is special education focused. And so for that group of 4 classrooms worth of students, they will only be with those 4 teachers during the course of their school year. Now, they'll be assigned to individual teachers, and we hope that they'll have the same teacher for much of the year. But as things change, and as students and or teachers opt from one side to the other of the learning continuum, we'll keep them within that pod of people. And so that's kind of what we mean by redundancy, is that we're limiting the exposure of our students and our staff to the smallest number of people possible during our school day or our school weeks, and still providing some continuity during the course of the year. So Katie's a 2nd grade teacher at that school. If from her perspective, if she starts in person, and one of her colleagues in that pod is the remote teacher working with the students who are remote, they might have to swap at some point during the school year. If Katie has a health concern of her own, or for whatever reason there's a need for Katie to be out for a while, she and that remote teacher will be able to swap spots. And although that's not ideal from a student perspective, to have some change, it'll be limited to that pod of teachers. And so that's really the idea that goes all the way through our middle and high school. So for example, AP Biology, we might only have one teacher in a typical year teaching AP Bio. In this coming school year, we might have to limit the number of elective courses we offer in order to provide redundancy in the teachers, so that the one AP Bio teacher has another teacher available should that one AP Bio teacher become unavailable. So redundancy is thinking about the organization of our school courses and assignments of teachers in a way that allows for the unexpected to be prepared for.
Terrific. Thank you. Georgia, can I ask you a question about high school athletics and extracurriculars? Do you know the plan for high school athletics and extracurriculars?
I believe that the NHIAA has said that they're trying to move forward with the fall season. That's exciting. But I know everyone who plays sports is really, really hoping that we can play, just because it's such an emotional outlet for so many kids. I personally don't know much about the safety guidelines. I think that they're working on that and trying to pass it to the executive board of the NHIAA. I read that the other day, but I think we haven't really discussed this much about what our school is going to do. But I believe if the NHIAA says we can play, that we'll try to do that in the safest way possible. And extracurriculars, we are doing some of them right now. Our sports have been practicing in socially distant groups of about 10 for training more endurance wise. And I'm in the school show, and we've been doing that socially distant. We're performing it on Friday. So we are going about those things safely right now, and hopefully throughout the year we'll be able to do them more normally and school more normally as well. That's the insight I have right now. Adam, you might know more. I'm assuming you do know more.
So still trying to do as many of those. What about performing arts, Adam? I know I saw in the plan that there was some talk about that.
By performing arts, do you mean unified arts, or do you mean extracurricular?
I guess I mean chorus, band, those classes, and
yeah,
maybe theater.
Sure, and we know about those have a particular area of concern given the interaction around singing or using instruments and how that can be a challenge with the virus. And so we're still investigating that, and music is really important to our school system and to me. And so we're going to provide opportunities for students to still engage in all of those unified arts sort of things, including performance arts. It might have to be in a different modality than we would prefer, that we're used to. For example, Georgia mentioned last year's spring musical is performing this coming Friday. It's going to be outside. The performers are socially distant from one another. It's not going to be the same. It's just the only way to describe it. But we're making the best of it to do it in a safe way. And so band is going to have to be like that this coming year, and maybe for years after, until things get back to normal.
Great. Deanna, can you talk about the plan for handling physical education classes? We also have a question about changing room processes. How is that going to be handled in the school? Will there be physical education classes, and how will they handle that?
I've not been involved with planning that, but from what I understand, it will be via the phys ed teachers will do a video of some kind, and then that will be shown in the classroom. Is that correct, Adam? And for changing classes, there won't be changing of classes I'm at the elementary school, so up till 4th grade. There will not be changing of classes. Children will remain in that pod of classes that Katie talked about, and just interchange with those 3 classes. So they won't be going through the halls. If a nurse is, or if someone's not feeling well, the nurses we're planning on going to the classroom to assess the child. If the child's taken out of the classroom, according to the guidelines from the New Hampshire Public Health Department, they will probably be sent home with mild symptoms. It's going to be sending children home. So, but to decrease the hallway traffic, the nurses will go to the classroom. We'll go to the classroom to administer medications if that's necessary. Anything we can to minimize movement through the school.
And has there been a conversation about what happens if a child becomes ill while they're at school? Is there a protocol of how they would be taken care of, and what the steps would be if that happens?
Yes, we would isolate that child. We have a couple of areas that we've designated to use as isolation areas for children to wait dismissal. Our health office at one of the elementary schools has a secretary or health assistant. So they would man the health office while the nurse or a staff member would stay with the student. They need supervision, obviously, with the correct protective personal equipment on. And we were planning on walking the children out to the parent's car rather than have parents come into the building to pick up the child.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay. What about bus transportation? Stephen, could you speak to that about the busing, or is there someone else that wants to speak to it?
Yeah, so I know our superintendent's actually in close talks with our local bus contractor, and obviously this is a concern not just for our district, but really districts across the state as we try to navigate what a properly social distance bus experience would be like. Whether it's hiring more buses, whether it's having students actually get transportation privately, i.e. their parents, or walking to school, like those are all decisions that are going to still actually be made in the coming weeks. I know Adam's done a lot of work reaching out to the community and soliciting parent feedback about students that potentially would use our bus system. And right now, actually, those numbers are definitely reasonable based on our concerns. We don't necessarily foresee us having the need to get more buses or have scattered bus routes just based on the responses to that.
Okay. Let me jump back to you, Stephen, and ask you about the money. So in the plan, it says that it's going to cost about an extra $1.2 million to be able to put the necessary supports in place, which include professional development, include the busing, include additional technology, support staff where needed. What is the district's plan for covering that shortfall?
Great question. So for folks that would like to sort of take a look at that piece, it's on page 16 of the deck that is sent out to everyone on the link. And there's actually a nice little hyperlink inside that page that actually gives you more of a breakdown of where we perceive these extra costs are going to actually come to fruition. So they go anywhere from PPE to development to signage to protective equipment that we're going to need to install in our various buildings. And for those who may not be familiar with New Hampshire, we're a pretty frugal state. We like to make sure that the dollars that we spend are dollars spent in the most appropriate way and manner. And that's going to be no different in this particular case. We are obviously going to have to actually rein in, variable costs throughout the year. We're going to have to actually control spending and do a must purchase type situation in our district. So if something must be purchased, clearly we'll make sure the funds are available for that. But if it's a nice to have or a potential nice addition to the experience, that might be something that we're going to need to defer. We're going to lean very heavily on our state leaders and our federal leaders to potentially get some additional funding at the local level. That's something that I know our state senators are actively engaged with the federal government on. Our governor is trying to funnel some more dollars to our local districts because these expenses are real and it's going to end up hurting the local taxpayer. But make a long story short, we've got a plan. We've got some contingencies that we could potentially implement in our overall budget, but that's something that we're trying to stay on top of. And this is going to be fluid. Things are going to change as time goes on because expenses aren't static. They typically either elevate or get reduced, and we don't see them getting reduced this year.
Awesome. Thank you. Katie, can I turn to you and ask you, do you feel safe as a teacher to return to school? And what parts of this plan do you think are going to help teachers feel safe to return to school and also feel like they're not going to have to work 24/7 to accommodate the needs of the student?
Sure. So I think the biggest thing is masks, to be honest. That was a big area of debate on this committee. And at first, it was just when we were in either the yellow or the orange zone, it was just staff and students in grades 5 to 12 that were wearing masks. And a lot of the elementary teachers felt really exposed if that wasn't extended to our grade level as well. So, and again, like the beauty of this plan is if you are not feeling 100% safe because maybe you have, some immune compromises or anything like that, then you have the option to teach remotely. I have chosen to go back to school and I feel totally safe with our plan in place. We've also talked about elementary teachers getting shields in addition to the mask because we work so closely in proximity to children when we're teaching them to read or small group instruction. So that's something that's being looked at for us as well.
Wonderful, thank you. And Shannon, what about you as a parent? You said, you told us earlier you have 4 children. Do you feel safe sending them to school this year? Or are you choosing to send them to school, or will they be learning from home?
Yeah, so those are great questions. I do have 4 children and their ages vary. My family's still weighing what we're planning to do for the fall. At this point, it's going to look different for each of my children. And that's what I really appreciate about the plan, is that it does allow me as a parent that flexibility to do what I think is best for my child and what they can handle. So my middle schooler is adamant. She's ready to go back. She is, she's on board with all the safety protocols. She's read the plan. Honestly, probably she knows more about the AMS plan than I do at this point. She's gone through it in detail, which is also, I really want to say, having this open process as a task force is challenging, right? Because you're not putting a plan out there with all the answers, which is hard because you want to do that. You want to be able to answer all of those questions right away. But I think it's been really powerful for our community to have the input and our students as well, to really be able to follow along and have a sense of what to expect in these really unexpected times. So I feel very comfortable with the choices that I have as a parent right now.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's really great. Georgia, one part of the plan that I really like is for each school, there is sort of a day in the life of different students that would be participating in the school. And it talks about some students that are participating remotely, some that are going to be in school. What does your day in the life look like for, let's say, this first part of this school year?
So I'm planning on going back in person. And so my day will actually look pretty similar to what it would normally look like. Upperclassmen are going by a period 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 as we normally would, and we're just gonna have all of our classes. And I think the plan is that when we have a free period, we can just come and go to keep as a little number of students in the building as possible. And that's normally what we would be doing anyway. So it looks pretty similar for me. I think they also decided that there's not going to be a free period limit. So as long as you meet the graduation requirements, you don't have to take extra classes. Hopefully we can take extra classes. Yeah, we can still take extra classes, but you don't have to anymore, which isn't normally how it was. So my day will be pretty similar, and it'll just be coming and going and wearing a mask, of course.
I noticed in the plan at the high school level, the 9th and 10th graders are sort of more in like a pod or a team situation where the 11th and 12th graders are sort of going to different classes. Adam, can you talk a little bit about that? What does that schedule look like? And also, what's your lunch plan and your passing plan for high schoolers?
Yeah, in our orange and yellow status, we're going to be limiting access to our cafeterias at all of our schools so that there is not large groups of people that are now intermixing. And so in large measure, there'll be lunch in classrooms or in small group spaces throughout. And what was the first part, Allison? I was typing an answer to a Q&A.
Sorry, you're doing a great job. I was looking at that. You're answering a lot of them. First part about the high school, with the 9th and 10th graders, they have some teams, right? Some groups that they're participating in. 11th and 12th graders, I think they're all going to sort of different classes. And I think that's your high school model. But could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, indeed. So our freshmen and sophomores are typically on a team of 4 teachers for the 4 core subjects for about the first part of their day. And then the second half is where they typically change and have different classes. And we're rethinking that model a little bit this year, again, to provide that redundancy, because each team only typically has 1 math teacher. So we've lost that sense of redundancy. And so we're thinking through how we can provide that with our still maintaining the team model, but with some backup. And we're also at the high school level thinking about staggering our school start and end times for some students to limit the number of students on campus. So right now our plan is for our freshmen to start the day at the normal time of 7:30 and end the day at the normal time. But for sophomores to come about an hour and a half later and have a little bit of a shifted school day, so that again limits the number of kids that are in the building at any one time. And for our juniors and seniors, it's more going to be a kind of a college model where they can come and go on campus as they need to based on their classes. And so again, that the goal there is to limit our on-campus population whenever possible. And at the high school level, that really works because some days, perhaps going back to AP Bio, maybe that class needs to meet in person for a lab or for something that can only really be done well in person. But if there are days where they can meet remotely and have their class work over Zoom or Google Classroom, they'll still be able to do that without degrading the educational experience.
Yeah, so it sounds like a lot of flexibility, and you can sort of do that more at the high school level. When students check in, will there be temperature checks, or how would students check in and out in that high school model?
Yeah, thank you. And I might ask Deanna to add to this a little bit. I asked the question early on in our planning process about should we be doing temperature checks, either actively through individual temperature scans or using the installed readers that try to measure everyone's temperature as they enter a building. And the answer was no. Our science and medical community suggested that it'd be something that we push onto parents to do on a daily basis before they send their child to school, for a couple of reasons. Not only the administrative burden of trying to make that happen every day at school. Second, if they arrive at school, they've already likely been on a bus or been in a car with other students. That's too late to catch them in some ways. And third, just because of we really need to engage our parents to own that part of the process. Deanna, anything to add to that rationale that we have?
Yeah, the nurses met yesterday, and what our thoughts are is that we will provide education. That's part of our educational component of this plan to parents of what they should be asking or looking for with their children. We're asking for temperature checks to be done at home. At this point, we don't have a way of communicating that for school. We're going by, we're looking into a program where parents can enter that in, that they've done that, what the temperature is. Of course, if someone's sick at school, we will be, or complaining of symptoms, we'll be checking temperatures, but we're asking it to be done at home first thing. And again, to add to Adam's concern is we're just afraid if we're checking kids come in, we're going to have a big traffic jam, and that goes against social distancing of trying to check every student as they walk in the building.
If there is a student that becomes ill in a particular class or pod, what is the protocol? Will that whole pod be sent home, or will they also be asked to learn remotely? How is that going to be handled if you have a case that happens with a child?
What the plan is for the elementary school, and I believe the other schools too, is the teacher will call the health office and the nurse will go to the class to assess the child. If the child's sick, we'll take them out of the class. If it's for symptoms of COVID, we'll put them in an isolation room, put a mask on them, one of our disposable masks, and await transport for their parents. It's supposed to be a 10-day, if we send a child home, this is per the state guidelines, with COVID symptoms, they're supposed to be quarantined at home for 10 days. They're supposed to call their doctor for testing because the state's recommending testing even for mild symptoms. And again, until the test result comes back negative, they are home for 10 days, whether they get tested or not tested. And then they have to have 1 day of no symptoms prior to coming to school. So the state calls this the 10-to-1 rule. And if there's siblings, the siblings may be required to go home as well. That's still something the state's talking about. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, and so there's no plans to quarantine the whole class if one child comes down with COVID.
That's what I was going to add. We would call the Department of Health and Human Services, not necessarily to quarantine the whole class, but we would go with guidance by what the New Hampshire Public Health Department tells us to do.
Okay.
And they will help us with contact tracing as well.
Okay, thank you. Stephen, has there been any plans to upgrade the HVAC system? I know it talked about that a little bit in the plan, but I don't think you've made any, it doesn't say anyway that you've made any plans yet. And then also about what kind of PPE will you be using? And will you purchase that in bulk for all the teachers, or is that something that they have to provide for themselves?
Okay, great question. I'm going to defer the PPE question to Deanna, and she's got a pretty decent plan worked out from that perspective. But in terms of the HVAC system, you know, we in New Hampshire hold on to things probably a little bit longer than we should, and our school buildings are no different. We have varying ages across our district. Some of our buildings are 60 plus years, and some of them are 20 years. Or 30 years, and the HVAC systems are in different conditions in different buildings, but that's absolutely something that we need to address for the fall. The issue is that are we going to be able to get it addressed for September 1st? And unfortunately, it doesn't look like that's going to be the case, but it's definitely on the radar. It's definitely something that we as a board are going to be discussing at great length and trying to find the funding to make those improvements.
Deanna, what about the PPE? Is that something you're ordering, or is that something teachers have to provide themselves?
The district is ordering PPE. They're ordering cloth masks for staff. They're ordering disposable masks to have as well, disposable pediatric masks. There's been some community members that are talking about making cloth masks for students that we'd have a backup if we need it. Face shields are going to be provided, like the nurses will wear face shields all the time, because if we are exposed, we would need to be quarantined, but with the proper PPE, we would not need to be quarantined. So as a nurse, we'll be coming into a lot of contact with different things. So we'll have that. Gowns would be provided if there's a chance of messing our clothes from secretions, and gloves, of course, we have all the time. The face shields are also going to be available for the speech language pathologists. We have something, I'll show you that one thing I made, but we're ordering like smile masks. I don't know if you've seen these with the open panel for the mouth, so you can see the mouth when they're talking. That would be especially important with hard of hearing children. But the face shields need to be used with a mask. They're not something that should be used separate, because they do allow airflow out the bottom where the masks contain all secretions in it. And like I said, that'll be for the occupational therapists, any of the SPED people that are working very closely, within 3 feet of students, will have the option of having that equipment as well.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I can see that we're running close to the end of our time. I know we talked a little bit about extending. Maybe we'll extend just for a few minutes and take a few more questions, but I know that Katie and Shannon have to go. So we'll just cover a couple more questions and go over just a couple more minutes. Can you talk a little bit, Adam, about the anchoring adult idea and sort of who the anchoring adults will be?
Sure. So at our high school level, we already have an advisory program that's well established and does a great job. I actually even have the opportunity myself to participate in that program as an advisor, which is a great part of my day. So those people really will be the contact, we think, this coming year. We'll extend that program. Our middle school was planning on starting an advisory program this coming year anyway, and so that focus has shifted just a little bit to support this concept of having an anchoring adult or a common point of contact for a family and a student during the year. It should be mentioned that that point of contact and that consistency will continue whether that group of students is remote or in person, and we'll attempt to maintain that same connection. And then at the elementary level, within that pod of teachers, despite there being maybe some rotation of who's teaching a particular group of students at one time, every student will have their group of students for the year that will be their sort of their kids that they'll be looking out for in sort of a special way. So it comes naturally to our teachers. Our teachers naturally think about children this way. So it's really providing the mechanism to make it effective and to be that single point of contact for parents and students.
Thank you. Can you also talk a little bit about any of you that want to, about the professional development that you have planned? I know the timing of that maybe is a little bit in question, and you talked about maybe delaying the start of the school year to get all that in, but what will the content of that professional development be?
Well, lots of things. So part of it will be that anchoring adult piece we just talked about, and to prepare our teachers for that and to feel confident about doing that job. Other things will be things like assessment. We know that assessment will look different and has to be different. And it's not about testing our kids, it's about making sure that they're progressing and they're learning during the course of this school year. And so we're going to provide professional development on what what assessment strategies work in either a mixed or a remote environment, because we know that has to adjust. Luckily, we're a district that has already invested heavily the last 5 years in performance assessment. And so that's something that we've already made that shift towards that. And so for us, the training is more about effective performance assessment strategies that can work in a remote environment, and not about shifting from a typical testing practice to more of a performance assessment practice. We also have plans for social emotional learning support for our teachers about all of the, we know that's a huge need. I don't know who in our staff came up with, or maybe passed on the phrase, maybe we didn't come up with it. In fact, I'm sure we didn't, but Maslow before Bloom, and thinking about our students' physical and safety and emotional needs prior to us being able to teach them. We know that, but we know that intuitively, but we're going to provide training for our teachers about those sort of things. And then just in some ways, the technology professional development. Our teachers got a crash course in that this past year, and you know, people like Katie became experts in things like Zoom. And you know, if we would have said the phrase, "Oh, I need to promote you from attendee to panelist before we prepare for our class," you know, we wouldn't know what anyone was talking about a year ago. But we've all become, it's become second nature, but our teachers still need additional support and encouragement when it comes to the technological side of things as well. So all of those topics and then some.
Awesome. Thank you. Georgia, there was a quick question from someone about how you're doing the musical socially distanced. Can you sort of explain what that's going to look like, you think, for the performance?
Yeah, we're doing it. We got this ginormous outdoor stage. It's the same one they used for our graduation. I don't know if you knew anything about that, but it's about like 40 feet long. So we are just having anyone who like speaks or has a singing part in the scene will be on the stage and socially distant. We're all having our own mics on our face as we would normally. And then the chorus, people just singing, will be in like the wings in chairs 6 feet apart. And we don't really have to come close to each other. It's a little strange because it's a show that required a lot of touching. So we kind of had to rework it a bit, but it's still great to be able to perform, and I think people will enjoy it. It's going to be recorded, so.
Yeah, that's awesome. As a former drama teacher myself, I can sort of imagine how challenging that would be, but how much it would still be fun to even perform, even if you couldn't touch other people or get close to them. So that's great. All right. Well, I think we've answered the majority of the questions that I see here, and I think maybe we'll go ahead and wrap up for today. I know a couple of our folks have to leave at 10 o'clock, but we want to thank you so much for coming on. And I just want to emphasize for everyone to look at the plan, because there's so much more information. And I think things that other school districts could glean from their plan, and a lot of really good common sense kind of ways of thinking about things. So I'm going to turn it back over to George, and he's going to wrap up for us today.
Thank you, Allison. And thank you all for listening in today, contributing your questions and sharing your thoughts. We'd like to thank our panelists. We're so grateful to have such a diverse set of voices to share their perspective, and also to share the role that they played in creating this plan for SAU 39. We are particularly grateful to have a student voice as part of today's webinar. So a big thank you to Georgia for her contributions. I also want to thank Adam for his leadership, and also for the work that he's done for his district and the work that he did to coordinate today's forum. Remember to continue the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag NEASC Forum. So in conclusion, for our panelists, for my co-host Allison Geary, and everyone here at NEASC, I'm George Edwards. Thank you very much for your attendance today.